and welcome to another episode of the Adventures in Advising podcast. My name is Matt Markin, and thank you for checking out episode 80. For many of us, it's orientation season, so hopefully you're doing well and making it through the busyness of new student orientations. If you don't already, give us a follow on social media. You can find us at Advising Podcast and also subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform. On today's episode, we are interviewing Tom Liljegren, the director of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences Advising Center at Utah State University. Tom has spent 13 years as an advisor trainer, and advising administrator across 3 large public institutions. He brings a background in counseling and data to his advising approach with an MS and EDS in school psychology, as well as previous work as a school psychologist in the K-12 education system. After working as a lead advisor and advisor trainer at Utah Valley University, Tom has worked for 7 years as the director of advising for a large and diverse college at Utah State University. He works to combine academic advising with career exploration and has a passion for utilizing motivational interviewing techniques. Outside of advising, Tom loves reading, watching baseball, listening to music, and spending time with his wife and 2 daughters. Tom, how are you?
Doing good, Matt. Thanks for hosting me and let me join here.
Glad that you're here. So let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into higher ed.
I definitely didn't anticipate going into higher ed when I was doing my own higher education experience, and I started out college feeling pretty confident that wanted to be a lawyer, and planned on that, and then planned on being a psychologist, and so I did a couple of internships in while I was doing my undergraduate degree, and the first one was working in a law office, and I was really impressed with the work they did and gained a lot of appreciation for it, and knew for sure it wasn't for me. And then the second one was working in an advising office as a peer advisor, and I enjoyed that experience. But at the time, I still didn't think of it at all as something that I was thinking of career wise at all. I went and got a master's degree in school psychology and worked in that for a few years, and there's things I liked about working as a school psychologist, but I don't think it was quite the right fit for me. And as I'd been away from higher ed for a little bit, I started to think, that advising thing wasn't so bad. I think maybe that would be a fun thing to go back to. And it took a lot of work to go back into it. I thought I kind of stumbled into it the first time and thought, well, I stumbled into it and now I got more education. And I'm sure I'll be able to jump right back in. And it took a lot of applications and a lot of interviews, but I was really lucky to get back in, and I've definitely never looked back. I've really enjoyed now working as an advisor for 13 full-time years in the last while, and plan to continue doing it. I think it's a really fun way to be part of higher education and to be both within the student's experience side, but also the academic side. And I really enjoy the field a lot.
Yeah, was there anything growing up that you originally were thinking, like, I want to be a lawyer?
Yeah, I was interested. I was always interested in the criminal side,
Yeah.
being a lawyer. But I think one of the things that really influenced me to kind of start thinking about advising, and even as I was thinking about being a psychologist and going into school psychologies, I had an awesome school counselor. My school counselor in junior high school and high school was just amazing. And so I always think that I looked at the experience I had with her and thought, like, I would love to be that type of a person for other people in their educational experience. And for me, that was more on the higher education level that I felt like was the way that I enjoyed doing that.
How long were you working as a school psychologist before deciding to try to move into the advising realm?
It was for 2.5 years full time, and then doing some internship before that. So really about 3 years working as a school psych, and that was I kind of got a pretty kind of my experience kind of ran the gamut from working with pre-K students to working with a post high school program of students with disabilities, and those were really and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with those students, but I think especially I learned with working with a lot of elementary school kids. I don't think working with younger kids was quite my strength, and I enjoyed more like working in the high school age. But I think college is the best fit for me.
Very nice. And so you're at Utah State University. So for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about how you would describe Utah State University, and then more so going into your role as director in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences?
Sure. So Utah State we're located in northern Utah. We're about 2 hours south of Salt, or sorry, 2 hours north of Salt Lake City, and about 25 minutes from the Idaho border. So we're right at the top of Utah, but we're a land grant institution, so we also have locations around the state in throughout the whole state of Utah. So we have locations in every county, and we have a strong agricultural mission. But I'm lucky that I get to work in our College of Humanities and Social Sciences, and in my college, we're a college of about 2,400 students, and we have, oh gosh, I should have counted, but 20 plus undergraduate degrees and 40 different minors and certificates. So we have a lot of different programs, and they're pretty diverse. And so I enjoy that I think like we can have a home for a lot of different types of students and students with a lot of different interests. And so I think in my role right now, I get to be the director over the office. So I supervise the other advisors in the office, as well as we have peer advisors who play a big part of what we do too. And so hopefully we can kind of set the tone for the experience that we want students to have, both going along with the university's mission for advising, but also knowing that the needs of our students and each of our programs are kind of unique. So we try to really strategize what's the best way that not only can we be really strong advisors, but how can we be strong advisors for the needs of the students in these specific programs. So I like being able to hopefully set some of that strategy and really collaborate with the great advisors that we have in our office on seeing what can work best for them. And I also work as the advisor for some of our programs too. So I get to advise for our interdisciplinary programs that we have in our college, as well as our intersectional gender studies programs and a number of different minors and certificates. So I like having that balance of being able to work on the administrative side, but also have a lot of student contact. Because for me, I think that contact with the students is really that's the really fun part, is getting a chance to work with students individually and see and and see the impact that advising can have, and also just their experience and success in higher ed.
Is that part of like your role as director, still having that piece of working with students? Because I know there are some people that may not want to go into, like, let's say that into administration because they lose that student contact, and now they're doing
Mhm.
more on the admin side. That's more the supervising. So how is it with your role?
Yeah, for mine, I don't know quite how to break it down, but I kind of think of myself as about a quarter time advisor and a three-quarter time administrator. And I did kind of actively look for roles like that. The previous job I had before this was working as an advisor trainer, and I really, there's a lot that I loved about that job. I feel like I loved the office I worked with. I loved getting a chance to interact with a lot of advisors, but I did really miss the student interaction. And so I did actively like really thinking, like if in a position that I'm going to be in long term, like I really want to find something where I have that student contact too. And so I kind of tried to find a position like that and really continue to build that into my position. And I get that's not always possible, and it depends on the position on whether that's a good fit or not. But for me, I feel like I enjoy that because I like being able to um, kind of try to put into practice the things that I'm working on with my staff too, and it keeps me using the same systems as my staff, and I think that um, for me it makes me a better advisor, but hopefully it's making me an administrator that can it just makes it easier on my end to really be connected to what other advisors in my office are going through and trying to help them as well.
Yeah, well, I bet anyone, if you have other directors, admins listening, they might be a little jealous knowing that you still have that piece of that connection with students. Do you find it hard though, in terms of, or because you might be meeting with them once, meet with the student, and it's like all your attention's on that focus with that individual, and then the next minute you might be in a meeting where it's like now you're
Mhm.
discussing policies.
Oh, definitely. I've joked with other administrators saying that like I usually feel like I'm doing pretty good as an administrator or pretty good as an advisor, but it's very rare that I feel like I'm like 100% on top of both.
Yeah.
And so it does. I do feel like I kind of shift gears on that, and there are times where I have to really where I feel like the administrator really takes priority, and sometimes I'd like to be able to be putting more into the advising side, and so it is kind of tricky to try to balance that. And I think that's something I'm always trying to like get the right feel for that. And there are times that I've kind of shifted around some advising responsibilities to make sure. Sometimes that's been dealing with like trying to even out the advising caseload of some of my staff, but some of it's been evening out my advising caseload, making it so that there was a time about 2 years ago where I could see that I really didn't have time to put in the effort that I needed to administratively. And so it took finding a way to lighten my load a little bit. And I think that's made a big difference for me, as well as kind of trying to be creative with. I'll admit one of my weaknesses as an administrator is delegation. It's something I'm continually working on, is trying to be a better delegator and really. I have a lot of great staff who I feel like can take on can do a lot of great administrative work as well, even though I don't ever want that to be their primary role. But I've tried to get better at delegating and making it so that setting up a structure so that other people can really, play to their strengths and do different things on helping the office to run strong too.
Now, when we met, it was at the Region 8, 9, 10 conference in Las Vegas this past March. And, I got to sit in on your pre conference workshop about motivational interviewing. And I thought it was a great turnout. It was a full room. Everyone was listening and chiming in during the activities. Like after listening about 5 minutes, I thought to myself, like, oh, we got to get Tom to present to advisors at our institution I'm at. And it ended up working out. And I think there was so much relation to it. Now, from your bio, you mentioned in there that you have a passion for utilizing motivational interviewing techniques. So maybe we can start with, for those who may not know or just getting a refresher, what is motivational interviewing? How would you describe it?
I've heard that the creators of motivational interviewing would think, like if they could go back and that they've thought it's really motivational conversations. It's less of an interview and more like a conversation style to help promote change and growth in the client. It could be applied to a lot of areas, but for us, in the student. For me, motivational interviewing is a really good way that I can try to create a really effective relationship with the student because it focuses on how to help the student feel really heard and how to really listen and focus on the student's needs without putting myself in there too much, not making it about me. And so I love those techniques and the focus that it has. And then on the flip side, it also has it's designed to really promote growth. And so I think some of the techniques and the approaches to it can be a really good way to help to deepen the advising relationship and help the student to not just have some answers, but really figure out for them how they can connect to those and follow through. And so I think that's the goal, is for me what really attracted me to it. I think something else that I really like about it is I work with students who are one of my roles is I work with students who are on probation, and a lot of those students, they're nervous to I think come into advisor. I think sometimes it feels a little bit like coming into the principal's office, getting called into the principal's office with being required to meet with an advisor. And like one of the main things I hear from students when they leave is, "Oh, that wasn't near as bad as I thought it was going to be." And I think that there is real worry about that. And for example, almost all my appointments are via Zoom or in person, except for my probation appointments, and probably over half of those are over the phone. And I think that it's that feeling of kind of discomfort in having to come in for the appointment and maybe some nervousness and shame about that. And I think motivation interviewing is particularly good with that group and helping to reduce some of those defenses and take away any of the kind of the conflict that sometimes that relationship can feel like, of saying like, well, this is where you're at, this is where you need to be, and making it feel sometimes like a little bit of a adding some conflict in there. And I think motivational interviewing, it really kind of is a way to approach those type of meetings that kind of takes that away and talks about ways that we can really partner with the student going forward. So I think that's really what drove me to it. I remember when I was a school psychologist, I was supposed to take a motivational interviewing class and ended up getting canceled. But I'd already bought the book and I decided to hang on to it, and I really loved it. And so I thought, so once I got a chance to do some additional training and things on it, I wanted to, and it's just kind of for me given me I think a set of tools and techniques that's kind of been the base of how I try to create those relationships with students and approach that.
Now, when you had presented to our advisors, you had a slide that you gave an example, kind of connecting everything, and it was a food item. It was like a Thai spun
Oh,
sugary item, and for you were mentioning that the story connects to advising and to advisors. Can you share that story with listeners?
sure. I one of the things that talk about in motivation interviewing is that there's different, maybe broad ways that we might approach a helping relationship. That sometimes that we might be that we might be kind of be taking control on it. That we might be very directional. Right? Say this is what you need to do. This is your next step. You can do this, do this, do this, do this. I think in advising, we talk about prescriptive advising. That might be, a really firm prescriptive advising approach. On the flip side, we might be followers, where we don't really offer much as far as specific direction, but we really just follow wherever the student goes. We might, see like what the student wants and just try to um, and just kind of follow that and help them with that path. Neither one of those are necessarily all bad. I think there's times where either one of those can really be appropriate. But motivational interviewing likes to say that we're kind of right in the middle of that with guiding. And the analogy that is to me, as we're talking about what this feels like, is I had a chance to travel abroad in Thailand with my wife a number of years ago, and it was the first time I'd ever been there. I didn't speak the language, and was really trying to learn about the culture there. And we had a chance to have a guide there for 2 days while we were in Thailand, and they found out what type of experiences we wanted to have. They and then they arranged how we could be able to best have that experience. They helped us know the history and the language of the places that we went to. But I remember one specific experience where we went by the side of the road and had that was a Thai spun sugar dessert, and to be honest, I don't know that I would have gone out of my way to have it. It didn't look great right at first glance, and but it was amazing, and it was just at a little street stop by the side of the road. And I feel like, and that to me was an amazing experience. That was great, and that was, you know, and that was I never would have known about without having that expert guide. And I kind of think in that same way that we know some of those little stops along the way that might be really valuable for students. And I think as guides, as advisors, we might know that club that might be a really great fit for the student's interest, or that class or that professor who might have had a similar journey to that student, or maybe we know of something in the community that might help that student to feel more of a sense of belongingness. I think those little things that can help really enrich the student's experience, and not just to enjoy their experience at the university, but hopefully also to that can connect them to what they want to do in the long run too. So I feel like that's kind of our role as a guide, is that we get to help the students with the language, the culture of higher ed, and then find those really unique things that we might be able to offer to a student that can make their educational experience awesome for them.
And you had mentioned about having these conversation with students and not making it about ourselves. I think you had put it, which I think there's a fine line where on one hand you're trying to connect with the student and relate to that student based off our own paths and experiences, but then there's the flip side of making sure that we're listening to the student, not trying to hear what we want to hear, and whether we're making assumptions and trying not to make assumptions about the student, and really making sure that we're listening to that student.
I always think, like to me, the advising relationship is really where the magic happens in advising, like the value of that experience that the student has. And I don't think there's anything wrong. Like I think making a human connection first is what's most important, and that can be sharing some of ourselves and helping the student, you know, letting the student in to know us a little bit too. And so I don't think that's necessarily a wrong thing at all. Um, but I think that where what motivational learning might focus on, and kind of what I try to put into practice, is as we're working with the student academically, is to really try to avoid any sort of judgment or imposing what I think that they should do. That doesn't mean I don't want to make suggestions. It doesn't mean that we don't want to, like offer recommendations on what those cool things they can do along the way is, or obviously a big role of ours oftentimes is planning and helping a student make sure they're on track. I think we can do all those things, but to try to really reinforce the student's autonomy throughout that process, and I think that can be really empowering for a student to know like that this is your education, and we want to put you in the driver's seat for it. We want to be your support along the way, but we want to help you be in the driver's seat. And I think in some of the ways that motivational interviewing does that is even just by I mentioned that a lot of it is kind of a language to try to help promote progress and being heard, and enforcing the student in that way. And I think some of that, like even just by when we offer praise to a student, I think my first instinct is to say like, I think that's really impressive, or I'm really proud of you for that. That's really cool. And honestly, those are great. It's great to offer praise and to affirm the student that way. But I think that if we switch that even from the you know, I think that was really impressive to that's really impressive, or and that was really brave for you. You did something that was hard for you. That kind of just puts the focus a little more on the student and a little less on the judgment that we've made on the student. And I think those little changes in phrases and stuff. I mean, um, it kind of throughout an entire relationship and throughout an entire appointment can just make it a little bit more about the student and help the student to just continue on with their kind of telling their story, or what their situation is. So I think that's a little bit what I mean by that. I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, within motivational interviewing, there's you had mentioned there's like four foundational processes. You have engaging, focusing, empowerment, and planning.
Yeah.
Not that you have to spend like a lot of time on it, but
Oh, no worries.
can you talk a little bit about each of those areas?
Yeah, and they so there yeah, there's these four different, and they kind of call them the four different tasks of motivational interviewing. And really the way they define it is three of those are kind of essential to motivational interviewing, and the fourth is something that oftentimes happens, is oftentimes part of that process, but not necessarily essential. And so the ones that would be essential would be those first three. So the engaging is creating that relationship, creating it so that us and the student are both feeling like it really involved in this process. So that's that process of creating that relationship, creating that helping relationship, so the student feels heard, they feel like that they're comfortable in talking to us and sharing things with us. And I think in all of these are continual things, right? We might work to this, to develop that relationship as we're first meeting with the student, but we can work to continue to deepen that relationship and to keep it up, and so it doesn't, so that it doesn't slide backwards, or don't have anything that makes the student to disengage with us too. So that's kind of that first process, is setting that foundational strong relationship that the student feels comfortable with us and feels heard. Um, the second one is focusing, and that's kind of from all the different things that we could possibly talk about in this appointment and this time with the student. What's most important to them, and what's going to be most useful in this, and that can be a shared thing where hopefully first we're focusing on what the student wants, but also we have expertise too, and there might be times where there's specific things we kind of have to focus on. I know for me, if I'm talking with a student the first time that they're coming in to explore the possibility of changing their major, I want to make sure that they really understand this major they're thinking of changing into. So I have a specific agenda on that too. So figuring out how we can kind of mutually have a focus within the appointment. And I can think of times when I've done a poor job of that, and I think like maybe the student didn't really hear some of what I said, you know because they're perfectly happy to hear about the major they're looking to change into, but first they need to know their registration date, or first they might just have a basic question that for them was really important. And if I'm not listening, then sometimes you know these other things that might be a part of purpose of the appointment may not really come across like I like to, because I didn't have that focus on what the student might have been their primary thought. Um, then the third part is evoking, and that's really like and actually changing. Yeah, it's kind of a evoking or empowerment. And I think this is kind of the essential, what kind of defines motivational interviewing. And this is where the student hopefully is leaving feeling um, more likely to be able to succeed or to make the change that they need to because of that interaction. And I think we can do that by helping them to increase their own belief that they can do it, or their own plan, and feeling like they can put something into place. And and also, being able to help them understand that there's a lot of things. I think that, higher ed is tough, right? It's tough to. I think that I work on a college design, a college to careers class, and I were this guy was having a lot of wicked problems that don't have easy solutions. And so I think it's helping students to explore that there's not one answer to most of the things that they're doing. So really being able to understand that there's a lot of options, and to help them both to not lean into the negative side of that, and to not feel quite so overwhelmed on it, but also to feel really empowered to be able to have a plan towards success. And the last step is planning. And I mentioned that's the one that is considered not the essential part of motivation interviewing, because I think sometimes the reason why you'd say that isn't as essential is because Sometimes that happens naturally throughout these other tasks. But obviously, honestly, when I talk with advisors about motivation interviewing, I don't really focus on planning much at all because I think that oftentimes is what we're really good at the start. Like I think we tend to get a lot of training and a lot of practice on planning, and so it's more kind of how can we make sure to be focusing on the student and to provide this information or provide our recommendations, provide that guidance in a way that's going to be most likely to be received well by the student and make it so they can put it into action.
Now, you might have listeners saying, Tom, this all sounds nice, to be able to do all of this, but I have a 30-minute appointment slot for the students. It'd be great to use these techniques, ask these open-ended questions. You know, is it even possible to do all of that in 30 minutes, or am I making sure that I have follow-up appointments scheduled with the
Mhm.
students? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think that by any means this approach is any sort of magic bullet. I
Mhm.
don't think that it's anything where it guarantees that you're going to have a great appointment or it guarantees that the student's going to come out of that and be able to be ready for success. What I think I like is I feel like the approach is something that whether you really like, whether you love motivation interviewing and really want to dive into it, or whether you just want to make sure that your students having a good experience and feeling listened to and starting to create a good relationship, I think there's a lot of techniques that can be really um, that can help. I think any student approach. So I know one of the things I talk about with my staff is that we do some training on motivational interviewing. I also work at an institution where appreciative advising. We're considered an appreciative advising institution. That's primarily where we do training at a university level. And I feel like both of those are approaches that can really be adapted into just about any advising session. And I think there's other advising approaches. I remember I had a staff member who was really interested in self-authorship theory, and during these two, I think that you know, I think it's less important that they listen to or that they really ascribe to this specific approach that I really like, than that they find an approach that feels authentic and works for them, and then can choose like, oh, well, maybe this isn't my home base in motivation interviewing, but I know that a student's um, going to feel heard more if I can be a good reflective listener, which is like one of the things that motivation interviewing talks about a lot. So like that's a skill that's going to be part of I think any advising approach is being able to help the student be heard and especially that reflective listening. Or if I can be really good at affirming the student and helping the student to notice those strengths, like that's there's strengths based advising. That's certainly a big part of that. So that's my approach. Is I think that um, I like learning about a lot of different advising approaches, and I think that it's like I know I certainly kind of steal little parts here and there of things that I may not consider kind of my home base in advising, but that I think that I can learn and how I can apply to my students. So I think that yeah, I don't think motivational reviewing is a magic bullet, and you certainly could leave an appointment thinking like, oh gosh, I just don't know how well that that the student didn't really open up much. I know that for me, that's the most discouraging appointment to me is when I go in and I think like, gosh, I don't think I got more than a 5-word answer the entire appointment. Like those can be really hard.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't guarantee success, but I think it gives us techniques that are at least making it so that we are giving that invitation to every student. And and that's kind of my approach to it. And I also don't think that there's anything that certainly like I think with any type of approach, if you're going to be doing some deep exploration of a lot of different options with careers, that takes a lot of time.
Mhm.
But whether even if it's a 5-minute drop in that a student has a few questions, I think we can be more effective as we're trying to really you know show the student that we're listening, actively look for ways to reinforce the positive changes they're making, offering other possible suggestions on things we could talk about. And sometimes the answer from the student might be, nope, not today. But I think it puts out the offer on like ways that we might be able to be the greatest help to for the student.
Well, yeah, since you mentioned careers, that definitely is a conversation that
Mhm.
is not just a one-off topic. You have advisors that may work with students who are undeclared, undecided, or they're in a major but now they're questioning that they should be in that major. You have those that want to have the direct major to career path. And then you have those that just, I don't know what's offered. I don't know what I should do. We could recommend going to like a career center, career services. But then with that, then it becomes, well, now it's another appointment they have to make. And hopefully they do make that appointment and meet with
Right.
them. And then you meet with them the next term, and things you had planned out didn't work out. They didn't do that. What are your suggestions for advisors working with students that might be undecided and trying to help them figure out a path to graduation, a path to a major, whatever it might be?
Well, I think that's hard. I feel like that's always a struggle in trying to figure out the best way for students to. I know that's an area that we really focus on a lot in my advising office as well as within my college in general, because we know that for I mean, we advise for the humanities and social sciences, and we do realize that that the first time that a student comes home saying that I want to be a I want to be a creative writing major, I want to be a philosophy major, their next question is, well, what are you going to do with that? And there's a lot of great things you can do with that, but it's not always, most of our philosophy grads don't become philosophers. They work for nonprofits, they work in businesses, they go to law school, they go in graduate school in tons of areas. So I think a few ways we try to do that is, we're not career counselors. We know that we're not doing career interest inventories or doing really deep discussions about kind of connecting them to their specific next step with their careers in my office. But I think it's our goal that first we just try to get students thinking about careers right from the start, so that that students are starting to think about building that bridge when they're freshmen and sophomores, and not when they're their last semester of their senior year. And so we try to get them, thinking about it early. We try have different career programming that hopefully students are connecting to, and we're trying to figure out strategies on how to best connect them to that. But so that they're seeing options of what other students in their same majors or in their same who've been in their shoes, how do they make that connection to a career? And in fact, like now we're building it into our orientation, to our summer orientations. We're adding a kind of doing some kind of career workshops because we want students to be seeing right from the start how some of the things they're learning in classes can apply to careers and how they can start to really think about how they want to build that out. So I think for us, it's really just trying to have that focus early on, ask questions about it early on, and I think that most of the majors that I advise in, or that we advise in our college, have a lot of variability to them. So there's no two students who have the same sociology degree or political science degree, because there's so many electives that they're really kind of choosing what their strength is. And so we really try to, as we're in advising, help students to be deliberate about that as they're making those choices about what they're going to take. How can that affect how they talk about their strengths, what they learned from their degree, what direction they're going to go from their degree. So I think that's the way we kind of build it into hopefully just students' everyday advising experience, so that each time they're meeting with us, they know that we're going to talk about some of how what you're doing in the classroom, how could that affect what you want to do in the long run. And I try to also, I think one thing that I think I try to really do is to kind of normalize some of students' fears about it too, because I think a lot of times students either feel really intimidated about figuring out what their career is, because it feels like, oh my gosh, I need to find this one career, and if I don't find the right thing, then I might be setting, that I might just be setting myself up for a lifetime of unhappiness in a career that I don't want. And the truth is that's not the case, right? We know that a lot of times that people jump from. I mean, I think they say on average that our graduates might be a generation that has three different careers, not different jobs, after they graduate. And so letting students know that there's not going to be just one answer. And truthfully, a lot of times, this is something I don't say as a discouraging thing, but a lot of times that job that you get when you graduate may not be the job that is your first choice, or that's the one that excites you the most, but it might be setting you up so the next one is. And that's kind of a theme we see in a lot of our alumni is maybe that first job wasn't exactly everything you wanted, but the next job was great. And the next job you kind of found what your niche is, and that too. So I try to help students normalize just that, like, you don't have to have all this figured out now. It's okay to not be sure, and it's okay to feel to not feel totally confident that this is the direction you want to go in the long run. Like you can maneuver a little bit and you can find your niche. And I think the other thing I try to help students to really normalize is sometimes students come in and they're really in the middle of that struggle. They're feeling, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to go to law school or if I want to um, graduate and try to get a job working in politics at the local or national level. And and those are big choices, big life choices. And I try to tell them that one, if you're doing stuff to prepare yourself for either one of those routes, you're probably going to be better prepared for both. If you're setting yourself up to be a great grad school applicant, you're probably going to be setting yourself up to be a really competitive applicant for a lot of jobs too. So it's not they're not the preparation isn't always drastically different. But I also tell students that if you're in the middle of that struggle, it's off. It feels lousy and it's stressful. But that to me as an advisor, that's really encouraging because if you're going through that struggle, I feel confident you're going to come out the other end, knowing yourself better and knowing your path a little bit better. So I feel really encouraged to see that struggle, and I let them know, like, but that's you're doing something brave and something that's tough by asking yourself those big questions and like so to try to really encourage them in that too.
I guess connected to that too, when you were talking about motivational interviewing and empowering, one of the things you had mentioned in your presentation was the importance ruler.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
can you inform listeners about that?
I love using this. It's just a little interviewing or like a advising strategy that I think is just awesome, and it can be applied to a lot of things. I think I need to get in the habit of using it more. But I use this a lot with students who are on probation or students who are struggling. And the idea is some people using motivational interviewing will have like an actual physical like chart of 0 through 10. I just do it hypothetically, but I'll ask them, okay, so and now we've had I've enjoyed talking with you this appointment. I want to ask you a question. So if you're rating your how you feel about being able to succeed next semester on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being, oh my gosh, there's no way this is going to go okay. This next semester is going to be awful. And 10 being, there's no way I can fail. This next semester is going to be fantastic. How are you feeling? And then based on their answer, so like let's say if a student says a 7, I feel like most of the time students say like 6, 7, or 8, something in that realm. So let's say if they say a 7, then I might say awesome. So you're feeling 7, and first I try to kind of I reflect that and say like what maybe that means to me. So to make sure that I'm on the same page with the student on what a 7 means. So I might say, oh, cool. So okay, so 7. So you're feeling pretty confident. You feel like you have a good chance to succeed, but maybe there's some things that make you a little bit nervous too. Because to me, a 7 means like, okay, you're on the more likely to succeed than not side on how you're feeling, but not feeling totally confident. So that gives the chance that for the student, maybe they say, no, I'm feeling really confident. I feel like that for me, a 7, I feel really, really great about this. It just gives them a chance to correct that to make sure if I'm understanding that right. But then once we do that, then I could say, okay, so you said you're a 7. What made it a 7 instead of a 5 or a 6? And that sort of like hypothetical question is a great way to get the students starting to think and to express. Well, I think it's a 7 because I worked really hard this semester and learning better note taking. I know that I can. I'm doing this class where I already know the professors, so I feel like I have a connection there and I know what to expect. And I've got better study strategies on where I'm going to study this next semester. And that's an opportunity where the students expressing that what they know about how to succeed, and the more they're talking about that, the more that they're that they're empowering themselves to really do it. So it's inviting that conversation. On the flip side, then it also gives a chance. Well, what would make it so great? So you're feeling confident because you've learned these skills, because you practice these. That makes it so it's a 7 rather than a 5 or a 6. What would help you to feel more that it's an 8 or a 9? What would make the difference to helping you feel even better about that? And then there's a chance to see like, well, what are the things that we can build on? And those might give opportunities for what you want to focus on in advising, or even just for the student to think, well, I think like if I got to know the tutoring center, I'd feel even better, or I feel pretty good academically, but I don't feel great about my finances, and so maybe there'd be resources that they need to feel better about things outside of school. And so I think it's a good way to both have a chance to reinforce what the student feels good about, and to, on the flip side, just lead to that discussion on what to do next. And I think sometimes, using that rating scale makes it a little less intimidating for a student to talk about that than if I just answered straight out, how confident do you feel? Or, what do you think, that are your strengths going into this semester? Or what do you think you could do better? I think that hypothetical nature of it is kind of a helpful way to do that.
Yeah, and if anything, it gives a couple more questions an advisor can ask
Mhm.
the student about, like kind of like you're saying, well, what's making it this versus a 4 or 5, but what can now make it an 8 or 9 or even a 10?
And I feel like some of the most valuable conversations I've had from that have been students who've answered like a 5 or a 6,
Mhm.
and hearing them kind of state, because I think most of the time if a student's doing that, they're probably not feeling real confident, right? There's a lot of things that make them nervous, and having that hypothetical question that makes them sort of think about, well, what are the reasons why I have some confidence heading into the semester? Why there's things that there's probably a lot of things that in that student's mind that are fears that might be leading them to be worried. This is a chance for them to spend some time thinking about what are those things that I do feel good about, and my strengths. So I think that can be a really good thing. And the point is never, like, we're not trying to ignore students' worries. The goal is not to have an overly bright picture of the students' success, or of what their chances are, or what their concerns are, but just to be kind of get that momentum and get the conversation to be directed towards what can we do to be moving towards progress? What can we be doing to be moving towards change? So even as we're talking about some of those things that are negative, we can start to be focusing, well, what can we do about that? What would you like to see different with that? Okay, so you're worried about your finances. So what would you like to see different? We can start focusing on that too.
And as we wind down with the interview, let's kind of shift gears. You had mentioned in your bio that you love reading, you watch baseball, you listen to music, and also being with your family. So, to end the interview, what are you reading now, or just finished reading?
I have a really bad habit of reading multiple things at once. And so I tend, and I've done a bad job of picking up books that are longer, that are taking me a long time to get through. So for a long time, the two books that I've been reading that I'm slowly getting through is I'm rereading The Lord of the Rings, which I read years ago, and I'm kind of starting to pick those up again. So I'm still in the Fellowship of the Ring and slowly working my way through, and I enjoy those. And The Name of the Rose, I really like mystery books, and The Name of the Rose is kind of a good combination of mystery and history, and it's a literature. It's a by Umberto Eco, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Is a really fun book, and so I'm liking that one a lot. And I really like Shakespeare, so I'm reading Macbeth. I haven't read that in a long time, so I'm reading that.
Right. Favorite baseball team and why?
I love the Red Sox. I think I've been a fan of them for a long time. I thought about this the other day. I think it's been about 26, 27 years, and I don't know that I have a great reason for that, except that when I was just becoming fans of really getting into sports. For anyone who is a baseball fan, might remember Nomar Garciaparra and Mo Vaughn were two great Red Sox players, and I thought they were awesome, and fell in love with the team when those guys were with the team, and I've just kind of stuck with it ever since. And I'm a big Red Sox fan, and I like basketball too, although baseball is my favorite sport, and I'm a big New York Knicks fan, even though I'm from Utah. And luckily, the Red Sox have been a good team to be a fan of over the years. The Knicks have not been quite so great. So it's been a rough 20 years as a Knicks fan.
It has. Favorite song of all time, or favorite new song you've listened to over the last year?
Oh, that's hard.
That's why I wanted to give you options.
I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan, and Thunder Road is probably my favorite song of all time. I really um, love that song a whole lot. Favorite new song I've heard recently. Okay, I'm going to think about this, and I will come up with what song I've been listening to a lot recently before the
Okay.
the right time here.
Well, as you're thinking about it, we'll say Bruce Springsteen. I mean, he's been performing for so long, and I've just been watching like clips on social media where he's still at it, and I'm like, good for you, still making music.
It is impressive. I think about that, like even even in my approach to advising. I did get a chance to see Springsteen recently in concert, and he's near the same age as my dad, and it was a pretty amazing 3-hour concert. And I do think about this even in advising, like I want to make sure that I can feel like, okay, maybe, and when I'm 20 years down the road in my career, I want to feel like that I'm as active and with it and engaged as I feel right now too. It was, yeah, it was a thought that I had on that.
Favorite vacation spot you spent with family?
Oh, my wife grew up some overseas in Southeast Asia, and so I think the chances to visit some of where she grew up and some of the people that she knew growing up has been some of my favorites. So I went to Thailand that I mentioned before, and also to Tokyo.
Mm.
I think those are two of my favorite trips. But I think those are not things that are regularly. I think those might be more of once in a lifetime things. I
Right.
think that for me, I like to try to, and whenever I can plan something baseball related into my travels is a good trip for me. So I'd like to find a way to go to ballparks or go to a game.
Very nice. Well, if you make a trip out to San Diego, we'll go see a Padres game.
Oh, I'm in.
Nice. What do you do for your wellness?
I think for me, some of my hobbies are some of the things that I do. I mentioned I like reading. I feel like that's something that helps me unwind. I think of myself as kind of a capital I introvert, and so I really love working with students. I really love working with my staff. But at the end of the day, sometimes I need a little bit of time to just be quiet for a little bit. And I think listening to music um, and and reading are things that I really like. I also I love spend time with my kids and my family, and so I think those would be probably the two main things.
All right. And then last question, and if you want to swing back to the music one, it's orientation season. So how many orientations are you a part of for
Oh
this
gosh,
summer, and how do you survive that?
I don't even know how many.
Too many.
A decent amount. I want to say we probably have, I don't know, a dozen or 15 or so. Sorry, orientation office. I should know that off the top of my head, but and I'm going to be out of town for a couple of those, but I think other than those, I'll be around for most. So I think it'll be about 11 or 12 of those for the summer. I admit I really like orientations. I think they're a lot of fun. I especially at the beginning, I feel like I go in excited to try some new things and really enjoy meeting with the students. I admit by like the 10th, I start to think like, wait a second, did I already say that in this one? Did I? I feel like I'm just repeating myself and they kind of blend together. So it's a
Mhm.
struggle for me to like remember that for these students, it's their first time. It's not, even though it's the 10th time for me. Um, but I like orientation because I feel like it's fun to meet students right at the beginning of their journey. And and so I like just kind of hearing where students are at the beginning of their journey. So I think I guess that's how I try to approach orientation is
Yeah.
just like it's kind of the just the beginning of that advising experience and getting to know them and that too. So
Yeah, I will say a shout out to like pretty much every orientation team at institutions because you kind of alluding to in terms of like when you go on the first couple, it's fresh, it's new. By the time you get to the last one, it's like everything just blends together. You're just kind of going through the motions sometimes. But for whether it's an orientation leader, the person that's coordinating it, like the parents, the family, the students that are attending these, it's their first and only
mhm.
time doing it. But for the orientation team, they have to always make sure it's their acting like it's their first time because it's that person's first time. So, I mean, the fact that they're able to still have that high energy doing it, like I know I couldn't.
I know
So, very much more power to them for that.
100%. And I can still remember the name of my orientation leader when I first went to college. And yeah, I feel like they make a huge difference. And I feel like that's one of the things I love with orientation was we try to involve some of our peers in our office and
Mhm.
between them and our orientation leaders, I feel like I'd like to think that I can do a decent job making a connection with students and getting students excited, but I feel like they are fantastic at it and they do so good at that. So I love involving students and giving them that peer interaction too.
Well, Todd, we've reached the end of the recording for this interview. I appreciate you being on. Thanks for all the information that you've given to listeners, and hopefully we'll have you on again.
Well, thanks so much, Matt. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you, and it's exciting to be on. I've loved listening to this podcast. You do a great job.
People wanna, people wanna, people wanna.